Hey all, JTC here, and welcome back to another tier list video. Today we're going to be doing Bardin's weapons in a tier list, and I'm going to be ranking these the same way that I ranked Kruber's weapons, in that I'm going to be ranking them with the strongest build that you can make with them. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start with Hammer and Shield, which is basically just a copy of Kruber's Mason Shield. So because of that, I'm going to treat it as Mason Shield, which means it's going right into BC tier. It has the same upsides in that it trades damage for stagger, but it also has the same downsides in the sense that you don't need extra stagger on a shield because it's a shielded weapon and it has more than enough stagger already. So because of that, it's just redundant BC tier. Same thing with Axe and Shield. It's basically the equivalent of Sword and Shield, although this Axe and Shield actually has extra single target damage and less cleave than Sword and Shield, so it's a little more unique, but it's still virtually the same thing. So because of that, I'm going to be treating it exactly as it is Sword and Shield. It's going to stay in the AB tier because it's better than Hammer and Shield in almost every single way, in the sense that you actually get a little bit of armor damage, better armor damage. Actually, let me rewind. That's actually a good point to make about Axe and Shield. Hammer and Shield is supposed to be able to help a tiny bit more with single target damage because you have the push overhead, which makes it super easy to get headshots, which in theory is supposed to help with killing single target and armored units more. But with Axe and Shield, you just get that base kit. Like, Axe and Shield is just better in every way, shape, and form at killing single target elites, or single target enemies, including elites, more than Hammer and Shield ever is supposed to. So, because of that, it's just better, but it's not fantastic because it's a shield, so it's going to stay in AB tier. Next up is Masterwork Pistol. Masterwork Pistol came with the Outcast Engineer DLC and is one of Bardin's, if not Bardin's, best ranged weapon. It's very, very good. It has an insane damage potential. It has pinpoint accuracy on the left click, and it has a rapid fire on the right click that can shred enemies, especially if you pair it with Ranger Vet. Now, it does have some actual kind of trade-offs which prevent it from going all the way up in S tier. It actually does have damage fall off, even though it has the damage output of that of a handgun. Handguns don't have any kind of damage fall off, or its damage, or their damage fall off is like super, super far. Basically, something that's you're never going to run into. It's one of the two. Don't remember which one. But Masterwork Pistol actually has a pretty heavy damage fall off, which prevents you from sniping super, super far. And then the left click actually does take time to charge up, and then the right click is super, super inaccurate. So you can't always rely on it to save you. But regardless, it is still a fantastic weapon, which is why it's going in SA tier. Very, very, very powerful, but not overpowered. Next up, we have One-Handed Hammer. Once more, One-Handed Hammer is the equivalent of One-Handed Mace on Kruber, which is why I am going to once more treat it like One-Handed Mace on Kruber. Amazing stagger potential, a lot of stamina to boot, very defensive. It has good damage, good single target damage, good headshot damage. It is an all-around solid weapon. Of course, it doesn't have as much damage output as some of Bardin's other weapons or Kruber's other weapons, but the deal with this weapon is it's very, very good. It's just a very good all-arounder, which is why it's going back in the A tier like One-Handed Mace did. Next up, we're gonna do Dual Hammers. Now, a little fun fact about me, I hate dual hammers. I fucking despise these weapons. I think they feel so unintuitive and so boring and so just not fun to play, but I cannot deny that these weapons are godly. They have insane stagger potential, and they also have insane single target damage with their heavy attacks, and because of that, they're going straight up into the S tier. I don't like them, but I cannot deny that they are probably Bardin's best melee weapons by far, especially if you're wanting something a little more on the run rather than like a two-handed weapon. These weapons have it all. They have not bad stamina, plenty of dodge. They have good stagger, fast attacks, which is huge for dual-wield weapons, and then it also has good single target damage. Not absolutely fantastic, but still very good nonetheless. So it's going right into S tier. What is this weapon called? Oh my god, I am totally blanking. Drakefire Pistols. Drakefire Pistols are one of two of Bardin's Drakefire weapons, which is only usable on Ironbreaker, but yet these weapons are, the Drakefire Pistols are actually still pretty damn good. their right click makes for a very, very good horde clear and kind of like a stagger if you need to make some room for yourself, as when you're playing Ironbreaker or Outcast Engineer, since you can also use it on them, I forget. And then the left click actually does allow for some ranged capabilities, which you don't have with the Drakegun. So if push comes to shove, you actually can snipe with Drakefire weapons, and while it's not good, it's still a welcome addition to be able to actually shoot something at range. So it's not as good as clearing hordes as the Drakegun, but it is still, regardless, very, very good, especially if you pair it with the talent that Ironbreaker has that increases the power of Drakefire weapons. So, and because of that, I'm putting it in the A tier. It's just, once more, a very, very good all-rounder, and the ability for it to actually have some range and shoot specials if you need to really just skyrockets it up. Next up is the Handgun. Handgun, identical to Kruber's Handgun. A lot of things you're going to see is that a lot of these weapons are basically just like copy-paste from other careers. You're going to see that later on down the line. So a lot of these, you're going to see me do this a lot. Now, to be fair, the two people that share the most weapons are Bardin and Kruber, so this is really going to be the only time, this is going to be the time you see it the most, but you are going to see it once or twice on some other of the characters. But yeah, back to the message at hand. One-handed, handgun, exact same as Kruber's Handgun, just as good, no damage fall off, really good damage, good sniper, versatile, although it has slow attack speed, so because of that, it's going back into A tier. Technically, Masterwork Pistol is better because it has the ability to rapid fire, and you can actually, like, shred things, and it has boss damage. So Masterwork Pistol is a little bit better than Handgun in my opinion, but Handgun is still a very solid choice if you're looking to kill specials reliably. And plus, if you can also hit headshots with Handgun, you can actually put Conservative Shooter on it, and you will never run out of ammo. Next up, we have the Coghammer. The Coghammer is also one of Bardin's best weapons by far, because while it does have the sign of a two-handed weapon in that it doesn't have a large amount of dodge and it doesn't have a lot of stamina, it's super fast attacks and high stagger potential on its left click makes it a very, very good offensive and defensive weapon both. And the fact that its heavy attacks deal such high amounts of damage and has, I believe it has a really, really high headshot multiplier as well, so it has a bunch of damage on headshots, and it's pretty easy to aim for headshots as well. It just skyrockets this weapon up to one of Bardin's best. It's super versatile, and it's basically good at everything it does, which is why it goes right into the S tier. And then we have a two-handed hammer. Now, this is going to be kind of where we deviate a little bit, and what I mean by that is that two-handed hammer is equivalent to, for Bardin, is equivalent to Kruber's two-handed hammer, but I'm not going to be treating this two-handed hammer the same as Kruber's two-handed hammer, and I'm going to be ranking them differently, and here is why. Kruber's two-handed hammer is just as good as Bardin's, but the problem that Kruber has with it is that it doesn't synergize as well with it. He and his careers just doesn't work as well with two-handed hammer as Bardin does. And to be fair, the only reason Bardin works so well with two-handed hammer is because of Slayer. Slayer and his extra attack speed and bonus damage makes a two-handed hammer an absolute beast of a weapon. Much better than Kruber could ever make it. And because of that, two-handed hammer is going right up to the SA tier. If you run two-handed weapons on Slayer, and you take the extra power, you just completely decimate anything in your path. The two-handed hammer is going to stagger nearly everything you touch, as well as just completely destroy it with the extra damage. You're going to have the 30% damage from the stacks, and you're going to have the 10% extra damage from the talent that you take, and you are just going to delete things in like 3 seconds flat, which Kruber cannot do just because he doesn't have Slayer. So, yeah. Next up is Grudge Raker. Grudge Raker is not similar to the Blunderbuss of Kruber because Grudge Raker is much, much better than Blunderbuss. Grudge Raker has 2 shots instead of 1 before he needs to reload. It has a faster reload, I'm pretty sure, than Blunderbuss does. It has a faster bash, I'm pretty sure, than Blunderbuss does. And it also has a much narrower fire rate of pellet spread, which makes it a lot easier to actually shoot through hordes, and makes it a lot easier to catch a lot more and kill a lot more. So because of that, it's just straight up better, and it's going right into the A tier. What do we have next? Next, we have Crossbow. Now, Crossbow is actually... Crossbow is weird. Crossbow is not bad, but when you compare it to all of the other weapon choices that Bardin has, Crossbow does pale in comparison. Bardin's crossbow can be built like on Ranger Veteran to have like a really fast fire rate and be able to shred through hordes, but you can just do that with Grudge Raker, so, and you don't need a build for that, so you can run whatever you want. So it's not bad, but you also need to build it a specific way to make it good, and because of that, I'm going to leave it in the AB tier. It's not amazing, but it's also not bad, so it's just kind of in the middle. Next up is the Drakefire weapon. Drakefire, not very good. Yes, it is really good at clearing hordes, but at this point in time, clearing hordes is not a problem. General horde clearing is not a problem for 90% of people who play this game, and another thing is that most weapons already take care of hordes really well, and also have additional benefits, whereas Drakefire gun is just, the only thing it does is horde clear. It's a one-trick pony, it does nothing else. So you're trading the versatility of other weapons for the ability to do one specific thing really good that isn't really needed much in the first place, which is why I would place Drakefire gun in B tier. Another reason it's not that great is it denies people the ability to gain temp HP through hordes, especially if they have, cleave on, or they have temp HP on cleave. That just completely denies them the ability to get that, and that can be super frustrating for some people. So, yeah. Warpick. Warpick, similar to the Drakegun, not the Drakegun, similar to the Crossbow, is not a bad weapon. It's just kind of outclassed by everything else. It inherently, its entire shtick is supposed to be, it has two like forms of heavy attack, and it's supposed to be like basically be able to like nearly one-shot like Chaos Warriors, and it's supposed to be able to fully one-shot armored units on a headshot, on a fully charged headshot. But like the problem is when Slayer two-handed hammer exists, you don't need that because you can just left-click everything into oblivion. Basically, it's kind of the way I view like Bounty Hunter and Huntsman, whereas two-handed hammer is Bounty Hunter and Huntsman is the Warpick. There's no reason to use the Warpick when the two-handed hammer exists, because the two-handed hammer does everything that the Warpick does, just better. It's easier to use the two-handed hammer than the Warpick. So because of that, I'm gonna leave this in AB tier. I originally had it in B tier, but it is not bad. It's just more difficult to use. So I'm going to leave it in the AB tier because you can get some value out of it if you're good at using it and you want to, but if you just want to have an easier time, use two-handed hammer. Next, we have two-handed axe. Now, this is the weapon I'm going to admit that I don't exactly know where to place this. Two-handed axe, pre-Winds of Magic, was bad. It was an objectively horrible weapon that was useless in every degree. But since the buffs it's gotten, it's actually pretty damn good now. It has good single target damage, and it has good defensive capabilities since it has like fast attacks, and its wide sweeps are pretty damn good for horde clearing. But the problem lies kind of similar to Executioner Sword, where when you start mixing hordes, when you start mixing armored units and normal trash units, it starts to struggle because it's going to get caught on the armored units. So I guess I would say it's an A tier. I think I would agree with the tier list I have on my other monitor. It's not amazing. It's not the best thing since sliced bread, but it's definitely not bad, and it's not mediocre. It's better than mediocre. So yeah, I would leave it in A tier. Especially, you can pair it with a two-handed hammer on Slayer to get that that buffs when you have the two. People know what I'm talking about. When you run two-handed weapons, you can get the buff when running with that, and it's also not a bad weapon to use for like single target boss damage. So yeah. Throwing axes. why do they exist? Briar Javelins are just superior in literally every single way. Why do throwing axes exist the way they do, Fat Shark? Please buff them, make them better. Also reduce their friendly fire damage. Oh my god, I'm so sick and tired of getting just absolutely reamed by any Bardin using them and just hitting me. Ugh. I also don't know why their left click has like such a pathetic arc when throwing. It just makes it a super redundant weapon. Plus, like, it's actually super hard to control the throwing axes. I don't know if that's just me, but like I just feel like the actual throwing arc for the throwing axes is off. It feels off to me. A lot more off than the Briar Javelins and like other like ranged weaponry, like the longbow that's not hit scan. But yeah. Next up, I'm actually going to do these two at the same time, the final two. One-handed and two-handed axe. Or one-handed and dual-wield axe. These weapons, prior to Winds of Magic, were two very, very different beasts. Prior Winds of Magic, dual axes was basically like all the, like S was like S plus tier all the way up here. They were godly, but they have been brought down significantly since Winds of Magic, and they're a lot more on par. Surprisingly, their damage output is very, very close to each other. I believe dual axes has a very slightly higher damage output than the one-handed axe does, but it's not by much. And you do trade a little bit of survivability. Since I believe the one-handed axe has one more stamina, or two more stamina, which is one entire shield more, these weapons are nearly identical in every way, and they're both very, very good. So you can pretty much just choose whichever one you want. I want to put them both in A tier since they're both nearly identical. There are some tiny differences, like I said. Dual axes has a tiny bit more damage and a little less survivability. And one-handed axe has a little more stagger and a little more survivability, but at the cost of a tiny bit more damage. And in my opinion, one-handed axe is easier to hit headshots with. So if you're looking to aim for headshots, go with one-handed axe. But yeah, otherwise they're virtually identical, and you can choose whichever one you want. But yeah, this is my tier list for all of the Bardin weapons. If you enjoyed, make sure to like and subscribe for more Vermintide content in the future. And yeah, thanks for watching, y'all. See you next time.